understand that compared to the morning session, a lot of the seats have got vacant post-lunch, which is a general norm with all conferences and summits. Thank you. That makes my job easier. Many a time I've been wondering since I got this invite, someone who belongs to the Ministry of Agriculture, someone who has been working with Ministry of Agriculture for the last 8 years, has been invited to speak at the Summit on Public Sector Undertakings, which has a vision to transform for the future. I'll make my best efforts to share some thoughts. I'm sure you know much more than what I may say. Belonging to the administrative service, I've had, of course, brush with various public sector undertakings in my younger days. I've had opportunities to look at restructuring of sick industries, particularly post the liberalization of the economy, where suddenly there was permission to the private sector to enter those secure domains reserved till then for the public sectors, and also managing some of the real good companies like the Odisha Mining Corporation, for example. I was listening to the previous speaker, where in true professorial style, Madam has analyzed the rationale for setting up the public sector enterprises in this country, why they're sick and what needs to be done. Now, many of these things are known to all of us as to how a particular organization can be run efficiently and what kind of performance indicators we need to lay down for these organizations to make them accountable for what they are doing. But what really ails the public sector enterprises, many of those causes are unwritten. They are not brought onto the papers. Now, I think one of the biggest challenges to the public sector undertakings is that the investor, that is the majority shareholder being the government, it believes that it can do anything and everything with a particular PSC. The minister concerned, of who the department which owns that, or the secretary and other officials, look at it as some kind of a holy cow. Maybe there's no other option because government rules are also so strict. Let's take for a simple example that there are some foreign delegates who have come, and now the secretary may need to host a lunch or dinner. His rules don't permit him to do that. But then it is required in the interest of the country, in the interest of the state. So what does it do? He asks the PSE to host that. Now PSE may not be directly related to that, but then it is done. So in a way, it is a larger public interest. Since one of the objectives of promoting PSEs was to remove the regional imbalances and to create employment opportunities, without addressing this in a rational manner, many a time we went about setting up different subsectors of the same enterprise in a very irrational manner. After all, when we decide the location, we must be looking at certain advantages. Is it because the resources are available there? So there's a captive coal block, for example, to set up a power plant? Or is it because we have OEMs in a particular location? Or is it because we've got technical manpower in a particular location? Irrespective of that, many a time these have been set up keeping in mind the political interest, because somebody made a commitment there. Therefore, when we ask these kind of industries, which in a way begin with a sickness cause, so naturally they find it hard to make returns on their investment. So Now, after the 1956 industrial policy resolution, we have a much more rational industrial policy resolution of 1991. And then, as you know, thanks to liberalization and reforms, a lot of opening up has happened, both between the MSME sector and the large-scale sector, and between the PSCs and the private sector. So today, MSMEs are expected to compete with many a time large industries, and public sector is expected to compete with private sector. And over a period of time, we are now seeing that they certainly are becoming more accountable. So the accountability is a very basic feature. And to give my own personal example, is when you talk of public sector undertaking, it need not necessarily be a profit generating industry. It can be a service industry, which is not based on profit, but it is meant to serve the society. So let's take example of a service-led organization. For example, the Bangalore City Corporation, or what's called Brahat Bangalore Mahanagar Palike. As a commissioner of that city, when we found that we were not having enough resources to meet the capital investments, and when we went to the government seeking additional funds, while the urban development department, the mother department, was ready to give us, but the finance department, which always counts its currency, it said, no, I just can't give you like that. So a negotiation happened between me and the principal secretary, and we agreed that we shall infuse funds into the organization provided you sign an MOU and you deliver on the commitments you are making, and the release of the money will be incumbent upon meeting the conditions that you have laid down. So now, this was a very good way of actually initiating reforms in an otherwise moribund organization. As you know, all city corporations, they are led by the elected bodies, and many of them do not want to be adventurous. When I say positively adventurous, they do not want to take any risk, and therefore the reforms are not happening. Now, since I signed the MOU with the government of Karnataka, I was able to use that as a ruse and a rational excuse with the mayor and his corporators, saying that if we want money, we better do it. And that's how, friends, we were able to bring several reforms. To quote a few examples, we now started digitizing, for example, that birth and death certificate. This was way back in 2000, I'm saying. Or we launched, for example, the Swachh Bengaluru, which is now Swachh Bharat. We had launched Swachh Bengaluru, which actually meant door-to-door collection of garbage, etc., etc. But more important was, in respect of infrastructure and in respect of property taxes, we made a very major commitment. As you know, property tax collection in most of the city corporations is a source of corruption, and everybody is accountable to that. Everybody is a partner to that. Both the corporation officials, as well as the resident owners, and of course the representatives. So now here, we promised that we are going to bring in self-assessment scheme, which meant that the guidelines are given. This is the matrix of guidelines. The resident is now free. Am I to close it? Yes. The resident is now free to evaluate his or her own taxes and then pay that online. Okay? And of course, there will be computer-generated random numbers to inspect that. But then as we started, now without that kind of a commitment made to government of Karnataka, we may not have been able to move forward with the kind of resistance that was coming from the representatives. So now one by one, we were able to go through the reforms and then seek the money. And I think this particular performance-based commitment and reforms is what the public sector undertakings must also actually go through. And before I end, I'll just take a minute and tell you that post the liberalization, particularly those kind of state public undertakings, I'm talking at the state level, which are much more badly managed than at the national level. At national level, there's much more of professionalism compared to the state levels. I saw, for example, as a Secretary Industries in the 90s, that we had our Karnataka Silk Industries Corporation, Karnataka Handloom Development Corporation, and various other organizations that were within my department, which were sick. We found a reason. For example, KSIC, it had got some 100 retail outlets across the country when its volume of business was not really requiring that much. So we had to close, as a part of restructuring, we closed down at least more than half of the retail outlets. Then we brought in capacity, new training, orientation, so that KSIC was not simply producing saris for the Air India, but it was also now getting into apparels, home furnishings, etc. So I think the simple example is that any public sector undertaking has to be given that autonomy as far as possible. It should not be treated as a milking cow. Then it should be performance-based accountability. And then, of course, with all said and done, we cannot look at it on the same plane as a private sector. There is a lot of discretion there. There cannot be discretion because public sector is government money is public money. So there are a lot of supervising bodies. There's a parliament, the state legislature, standing committees, statutory committees, CBI, ED, so on and so forth. So no MD, no CEO has got that much of courage to take a decision in a hurried manner. And if you don't take decision quickly, you're losing an opportunity in the market, whether getting into the capital markets, buying raw material, selling your goods, etc., etc. So there will be some problems in public sector undertaking, and yet we need to have public sector undertaking as a strategic intervention and in order to serve particularly the social welfare measures. So I'll stop here, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity and letting me refresh my old memory after several years. It was a pleasure. Thanks so much.